Welcome back to Wealthwise, the podcast where clarity meets strategy, helping you navigate the often complex world of personal finance and build a life of true abundance. I'm your host, Sarah. Have you ever found yourself scrolling through social media, seeing these glimpses of what wealth supposedly looks like, and wondered, what does it actually take to be in, say, the top 10% of wealthiest Americans? Is it an astronomical figure reserved for a select few? Or is it something more attainable than we've been led to believe? Today, we're peeling back the layers on exactly that. We're diving deep into cracking the top 10%, the real numbers, and your roadmap to get there. This isn't about lottery wins or overnight success. It's about understanding the reality and the practical steps. And to guide us through this, I'm absolutely thrilled to have the brilliant Max Wise with us. Max is a highly respected financial analyst, the insightful founder of the Enlightened Finance Academy, and genuinely one of the clearest voices I know when it comes to demystifying money and strategy. By the end of this conversation, you're going to walk away with 1, the actual net worth figure you need to hit to be in that top 10%. And I promise, it might genuinely surprise you. 2, a clear understanding of why so many common beliefs and narratives around wealth are fundamentally flawed. And 3, most importantly, the actionable, no-nonsense strategies you can start implementing today to build that kind of significant, sustainable wealth. Max, welcome to Wealthwise. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Sarah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here and to talk about such an important topic.
Max, it's fantastic to have you. So let's dive right in. This whole idea of being in the top 10% of the wealthy, it often conjures up these almost larger-than-life images, doesn't it? We picture the mega mansions, the private jets, a lifestyle that feels almost mythical for most people. From your perspective, why is this topic, this benchmark, so misunderstood by so many?
That's an excellent starting point, Sarah, and you're absolutely right. There's often a Grand Canyon-sized gap between public perception and financial reality. I think it boils down to a few key things. Firstly, there's a kind of social projection and herd mentality. When we hear top 10% in almost any other field, think of a top 10% athlete, a top 10% surgeon, a top 10% musician. We're talking about an exceptional, almost rarefied level of skill and achievement. It's natural then for people to subconsciously apply that same extreme yardstick to wealth, automatically picturing multi-millionaires, if not billionaires, living these incredibly lavish, almost untouchable lifestyles. The media often reinforces this by showcasing the 0.01%, not the 10%. Secondly, and this is crucial, there are some deeply ingrained common misconceptions. The absolute biggest one is equating high income with being wealthy. They are not the same thing, not by a long shot. You can earn a fantastic six-figure, even multiple six-figure salary, but if your spending habits, your lifestyle choices, mean that all that money is flowing out just as fast as it's coming in, you're not actually building wealth. You might be living well, but you're on a treadmill. We're going to be talking a lot about net worth today because that's the true measure of financial standing. What you own minus what you owe. This ties directly into another major misconception. The pervasive belief that reaching the top 10% is simply an unattainable dream for the average person. It feels so distant, so other, that many people just don't even consider it a realistic personal goal. It's a self-limiting belief that unfortunately prevents many from even starting the journey. So let's ground this in some actual data, which often tells a very different story. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, which is one of the most comprehensive data sets we have, and if we adjust for inflation looking out to, say, 2025, the net worth required to be in the top 10% of American households is actually around $1.06 million. Now, let me be clear. $1.06 million is still a very significant amount of money. It requires discipline, strategy, and time. But it's a tangible number, And it's a world away from the tens or hundreds of millions that many people automatically associate with that top 10% label. It puts it in a different perspective, doesn't it? And just to ensure everyone listening is on the same page, your net worth is quite simply the total value of all your assets. Think your home equity, your investment portfolios, your retirement accounts, your savings, minus all your liabilities, which are your debts, like a mortgage, and your car loans, student loans, credit card balances. So for a quick example, if you own a home with $200,000 in equity, have $20,000 in various investments, but you owe $30,000 on a car, your net worth is $190,000. It's that fundamental calculation that really shows your financial position. I've seen this play out countless times in real life. I know individuals earning, say, $250,000 or $300,000 a year who, when you actually look at their balance sheet, have a surprisingly low, sometimes even negative net worth because their lifestyle costs and debts are incredibly high. They're income rich but asset poor. Conversely, I've met people with much more modest incomes, teachers, nurses, skilled tradespeople, who, through consistent disciplined saving and investing over decades, have comfortably surpassed that $1 million net worth mark and are well within that top 10%. It really underscores the point that it's often less about the sheer size of your paycheck and far more about smart, consistent financial habits over time.
That's such a crucial distinction, Max, the difference between high income and actual tangible wealth. And that 1.06 million figure, while certainly substantial, as you said, definitely feels more comprehensible, perhaps, maybe even more approachable for people than the vague, often intimidating idea of being super rich. It immediately makes me wonder, if that's the reality of the number, what are the major roadblocks or the critical mistakes people are making that prevent them from even getting close to that number? And perhaps more importantly, what can they start doing differently? I'm really keen to get into the core insights on that practical side of things.
Absolutely, Sarah, and that's exactly where we're headed. There are some very common, almost predictable pitfalls that trip people up, but equally, there are some very clear, actionable strategies that can pave the way.
Max, that $1.06 million figure certainly reframes the target for many of us. It feels less like a distant galaxy and more like a mountain we can actually strategize to climb. So, building on what you said earlier about income not equating to wealth, what are the most common, almost insidious roadblocks or mistakes you see people making? The things that keep them, even those earning decent money, stuck in a financial holding pattern, far from that top 10%.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it, Sarah? And you're right. Even with good incomes, people get derailed. I consistently see three major wealth assassins, if you will, that hold people back. First, and it's a big one, is succumbing to lifestyle inflation. This is the classic more money, more problems, or at least more money, more spending. As our income rises, often after a promotion or a new job, there's this very natural, very human urge to upgrade our lives. A nicer car, a bigger apartment, more expensive vacations, fancier dinners out. And initially, these things bring a dopamine hit, a feeling of reward. But the shine wears off quickly. The issue is when these upgrades become the new baseline, and then the next income jump leads to the next round of upgrades. It's a perpetual creep. You mentioned the statistic earlier. Some studies show around 36% of Americans earning $200,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. That's astounding, right? It means that despite a very healthy income, their expenses are rising in lockstep, leaving little to nothing for actual wealth creation. It's not always the big, obvious splurges either. Sometimes it's the death by 1,000 cuts, the slightly more expensive coffee every day, the premium streaming services you barely use, the constant wardrobe updates. The key isn't to live like a monk, but to make conscious choices. Before you upgrade, ask, does this truly add long-term value and happiness, or is it a fleeting desire that will ultimately divert funds from your long-term financial freedom? For instance, instead of immediately funneling that entire raise into a higher mortgage or car payment, consciously decide to allocate a significant portion, say 50% or more, of that new income directly to your investments or savings goals before it even hits your main checking account. The second major misstep, Sarah, is getting crushed by car debt beyond your means. Look, I get it. Cars are more than just transportation for many. They're status symbols, a source of pride. But the financial drain from an overly expensive vehicle can be absolutely crippling to wealth building. We're not just talking about the monthly payment, which, as you cited from the original content, averages around $742 for new cars in the US, with many people paying over $1,000 a month. That's already a huge chunk. But then you layer on top of that skyrocketing insurance premiums. I've seen clients whose insurance has jumped 30 to 50% in just a few years, plus maintenance, fuel, and the silent killer, depreciation. A new car can lose 20 to 30% of its value in the first year alone. That's money vanishing into thin air. I had a friend, a smart guy, good job, who got caught in this. He bought a luxury SUV he couldn't comfortably afford, mostly because his colleagues were driving similar vehicles. He rationalized it. But for years, a disproportionate amount of his income went to servicing that car. He was stressed about the payments, skimmed on retirement contributions, and missed out on years of potential investment growth. The best practice, often cited, is to keep your total monthly car expenses, payment, insurance, maintenance, under 10% of your gross monthly income. Many people are way over that, effectively choosing a depreciating asset over appreciating ones. And the third critical mistake, Sarah, is investment procrastination, just sitting on the sidelines, waiting. The market is near all-time highs? I'll wait for a dip. The market just dipped. Ooh, it might go lower. I'll wait. There's always a reason to wait if you look for one. But history is overwhelmingly clear that waiting is one of the most guaranteed ways to not build significant wealth. The Fidelity study you mentioned is a perfect illustration. If you invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 from 1980 to the end of 2022, you'd have over $1.08 million. Miss just the best 5 days in that entire 42-year period, and your return drops by 38%. Miss the best 10 days, you're down 55%. Those big up days often come unexpectedly, often during periods of volatility or right after downturns when waiting feels safest. But by waiting, you miss the rocket ship. Unless you're very close to retirement and your primary goal is capital preservation, being out of the market is often far greater risk to your long-term wealth than short-term volatility.
Those 3 points, lifestyle inflation, car debt, and investment paralysis, are so incredibly common. They really paint a picture of how easily good intentions can be sidetracked.
Want to crack the top 10%? Dodge these 3 wealth assassins: runaway lifestyle inflation, oversized car payments, and the "I'll invest later" trap. Master these, and you're steering your own financial future.
Those mistakes are definitely eye-opening, Max. It's clear how they can erode financial progress. So let's flip the script. For our listeners, many of whom are ambitious and eager to build, what's the constructive path forward? What is that solid roadmap, the actionable steps that an ordinary person, even starting with an average salary, can take to genuinely work towards that top 10% net worth goal?
Absolutely, Sarah. The good news is that the path, while requiring discipline, isn't shrouded in some arcane mystery. It's built on fundamental principles. I'd break it down into 4 core actionable steps. 1. Master your cash flow through budgeting and tracking and uncover the gap. This sounds basic, I know, but it's the bedrock. You must have a clear, honest picture of what money is coming in and, just as importantly, where it's all going. Not vaguely, but specifically. Whether you use an app like Mint, YNAB, you need a budget, a detailed spreadsheet, or even the envelope system, find what works for you and stick to it. The goal here is to identify and then consciously widen what I call the gap, or what the FIRE community, Financial Independence Retire Early, often calls your savings rate or margin. This is the difference between your after-tax income and your total expenses. This gap is your primary wealth-building engine. It's the money you'll have available to pay down debt and, crucially, to invest. Someone earning $60,000 a year with a $1,000 monthly gap, $12,000 a year, is in a far stronger wealth-building position than someone earning $120,000 with only a $500 monthly gap, or $6,000 a year.
I worked with a client, let's call her Jane. When we first met, she felt like she was drowning despite a decent income. We spent a month meticulously tracking every single dollar. She was shocked to find hundreds going to unused subscriptions, impulse online purchases, and too many takeout meals. By consciously redirecting those funds, she created a $700 monthly gap without feeling deprived, simply by aligning her spending with her actual values and goals. 2. Aggressively eliminate high-interest debt. This is non-negotiable. If you're carrying debt with interest rates of, say, 10%, 15, 20% or more, think credit card debt, payday loans, some personal loans, you're essentially trying to run a race with an anchor tied to your leg. The interest you're paying on that debt is likely outstripping or at least severely hampering any investment gains you might be making. It's like negative compounding against you. Make a plan. Whether you use the debt snowball method, paying off smallest debts first for psychological wins, or the debt avalanche method, tackling highest interest rates first to save more money, pick one and be relentless. Every dollar you free up from servicing high-interest debt is a dollar that can then be deployed into wealth-building assets. 3. Systematically boost your savings and investment rate. The average savings rate in America hovers at a dismal 4.9%, as you mentioned earlier from the source material. That just won't cut it if you have ambitious financial goals. You need to be aiming for at least 15% of your gross income going towards savings and investments, and ideally pushing towards 20% or even 25% if you're serious about accelerating your journey to the top 10% net worth. This doesn't mean you have to live on ramen noodles. It means being intentional. It means when you get a raise, a significant portion of that new money is automatically allocated to your investment accounts before it has a chance to be absorbed into lifestyle creep. It means scrutinizing those expenses identified in step 1 and reallocating. And 4, the crucial follow-through, consistently invest that gap. Saving money in a bank account earning next to nothing isn't enough. That money needs to be put to work. For most people, this means regularly investing in a diversified portfolio, often through low-cost index funds or ETFs that track broad market indices like the S&P 500 or a total stock market index. You mentioned the example from the content, someone with an $85,000 household income. If they save and invest 20% of that, which is $17,000 a year, or about $1,417 a month, and achieve an average annual return of 8%, which is historically achievable over the long term in the stock market, they could indeed hit that $1.01 million net worth in about 22 years. What's powerful here is that even if you start later, say 43, you could still reach that by a traditional retirement age of 65. If you're 25 and do this, you'll likely far exceed it. The key is the consistency of the investment, month in, month out, regardless of market noise.
That's such a clear, methodical approach, Max. It demystifies it from being about luck or genius stock picking to being about consistent, smart habits.
Exactly. The path to the top 10% isn't paved with get-rich-quick schemes. It's built with the bricks of disciplined budgeting, aggressive debt elimination, a robust savings rate, and relentless, consistent investing. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That example of reaching over $1 million in 22 years on an average income by consistently investing 20% is genuinely inspiring, Max. It offers real hope. You touched on starting early versus starting later. Can you expand a bit more on the sheer power of time and compound interest in this wealth-building journey, especially for our younger listeners who might feel they don't have enough to start investing yet?
Oh, Shara, time is the closest thing we have to a superpower in finance, and its most potent expression is compound interest, or as Einstein supposedly called it, the eighth wonder of the world. It's the concept of your earnings generating their own earnings. Your money makes money, and then the money that money made also makes money. It's a virtuous cycle. Think of it like a snowball rolling down a hill. Initially, it's small and it picks up snow slowly, but as it gets bigger, it picks up more snow faster and faster with each revolution. That's compounding. Your initial investments are the core of the snowball. The returns are the first layer of snow. Then, those returns, reinvested, start earning their own returns, more snow.
and the process accelerates. You referenced a fantastic point from the outline. The first $100,000 is often the hardest and takes the longest. In that example of someone investing $10,000 a year at a 7% return, aiming for $1 million in 30 years, getting to that first $100,000 can take roughly 7-8 years, which is about 25.5% of the total 30-year time frame, just for the first 10% of the goal. Why is that? Because in the early years, the heavy lifting is done by your contributions. The snowball is still small, so the compounding effect isn't as dramatic. You're also forming habits, overcoming inertia, and learning. But once you hit that $100,000 mark, something magical starts to happen. Your existing capital starts to generate significant returns on its own. To get from $100,000 to $200,000 might only take 5-6 years. And then from, say, $500,000 to $1 million, it can happen even faster, sometimes in just a few years, because the base upon which your returns are compounding is so much larger. Your money is truly working hard for you. So my advice to younger listeners, anyone in their late teens, 20s, or early 30s, is unequivocal. Start now, even if it's small. The biggest mistake young people make is thinking, I'll start investing when I have more money, or it's too complicated, or retirement is too far away to worry about. Every single one of those is a wealth-delaying excuse. If you can only afford to invest $50 or $100 a month right now, do it. The habit of investing regularly is as important as the amount in the early days. That $100 invested at age 25 has decades longer to compound and grow than $100 invested at age 35 or 45. Think about two friends. Friend A starts investing $200 a month at age 25. Friend B waits until age 35 but invests $400 a month to catch up. Assuming an 8% average annual return, by age 65, friend A, who started earlier with less, will likely have significantly more money than friend B, despite friend B investing a larger monthly sum for a longer period of his actual investing life. That's the raw power of giving your money more time to work. It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. Those extra 10 years for friend A are golden.
That's such a clear, methodical approach, Max. It demystifies it from being about luck or genius stock picking to being about consistent, smart habits.
Exactly. The path to the top 10% isn't paved with get-rich-quick schemes. It's built with the bricks of disciplined budgeting, aggressive debt elimination, a robust savings rate, and relentless, consistent investing. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's such a powerful illustration, Max. The idea that consistency and an early start can actually outperform larger, later contributions really brings home the magic of compounding.
Don't underestimate the profound impact of small, consistent actions taken over long periods. That $100 invested in your 20s isn't just $100. It's a seed for a mighty financial oak tree, given enough decades to grow.
Max, your insights into the common pitfalls and the actionable roadmap are incredibly valuable. We've talked a lot about strategies and numbers, but personal finance is also deeply, well, personal. It's often shaped by our own experiences, our own stumbles, and our own aha moments. I'm sure throughout your own financial journey, building the expertise you have today, there must have been moments that really stood out, perhaps even challenged you. Was there a particular turning point, maybe a significant mistake or a profound breakthrough that fundamentally changed how you think about money and building wealth?
Oh, absolutely, Sarah. There's no textbook that can teach you some lessons quite like a real-world financial faceplant, right? And I definitely had one that, looking back, was probably one of the most formative experiences of my early career. It was a few years after I started working in finance. I had been grinding, putting in the hours, and I received my first really substantial bonus. We're talking a figure that, for me, at that age, felt like a windfall. And what did I do? Exactly what we just talked about not doing. I fell headfirst into the lifestyle inflation trap. Almost immediately, that bonus money burned a hole in my pocket. My internal narrative was something like, I've worked hard, I deserve this. And while there's truth to rewarding yourself, I took it to an extreme without any real long-term thought. The first big purchase was a car. A sleek German sports sedan that was way more car than I needed and, frankly, could comfortably afford when you factored in everything. Then came the accessories to that lifestyle. Designer clothes that I barely wore, expensive watches, eating out at trendy restaurants several nights a week, simply because I could. On the surface, to an outsider, I probably looked successful. I had the trappings. But internally, a different story was unfolding. I remember this distinct feeling, maybe 6 or 8 months into this new, upgraded lifestyle. I was sitting in my expensive car, in traffic, on my way to a job that I generally liked, but I felt trapped. I realized I was working incredibly hard, not to build freedom or to increase my actual financial security, but primarily to maintain these things. The car payment was a beast, the insurance was eye-watering, and my savings rate, which had been decent before, had plummeted. My net worth, when I finally had the courage to look at it honestly, had barely budged despite the significant increase in my income. The aha moment wasn't a sudden lightning bolt, but more of a dawning, uncomfortable realization. I was living a life that was performative in a way. I was chasing a version of success that was defined by external validation rather than internal satisfaction or long-term security. It was a pretty stark wake-up call. I felt a bit foolish, actually. Here I was, working in finance, advising others in a junior capacity, yet my own financial house was built on a shaky foundation of consumer debt and vanity. That experience, that feeling of being on a high-earning hamster wheel, was incredibly humbling, but it was also the catalyst I needed. It forced me to get brutally honest with myself about my values, my priorities, and what true wealth actually meant to me. It wasn't about the flashy car. It was about options, freedom, and peace of mind. That failure, if you can call it that, ignited a much deeper passion for understanding personal finance, not just theoretically, but practically. I started devouring books not just on investing, but on behavioral finance, on the psychology of money, on frugal living, on building sustainable wealth. I realized that controlling my spending and consciously, systematically focusing on growing my net worth, the actual assets minus liabilities, was infinitely more empowering than just chasing a bigger paycheck to fund a more expensive lifestyle. It led me to downsize the car, cut back drastically on the frivolous spending, and aggressively redirect that cash flow into investments. The relief was almost immediate, and seeing my net worth start to climb, slowly at first, but then with more momentum, was far more satisfying than any material possession had ever been. So yes, that couve up, that brush with lifestyle inflation, was a painful but ultimately invaluable lesson that profoundly shaped my approach to finance and, in many ways, led me to want to share these insights more broadly.
Max, thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a relatable story, and I think that honesty about the emotional side of money, the desire for validation, the feeling of being trapped, will resonate deeply with so many of our listeners. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our biggest lessons come from our mistakes, and that self-awareness is key. That shift from external appearances to internal net worth growth is just so fundamental.
Exactly. The numbers are important, but understanding the why behind our financial decisions and our emotional triggers is where the real transformation happens.
Max, your insights into the common pitfalls and the actionable roadmap are incredibly valuable. We've talked a lot about strategies and numbers, but personal finance is also deeply, well, personal. It's often shaped by our own experiences, our own stumbles, and our own aha moments. I'm sure throughout your own financial journey, building the expertise you have today, there must have been moments that really stood out, perhaps even challenged you. Was there a particular turning point, maybe a significant mistake or a profound breakthrough, that fundamentally changed how you think about money and building wealth?
Oh, absolutely, Sarah. There's no textbook that can teach you some lessons quite like a real-world financial faceplant, right? And I definitely had one that, looking back, was probably one of the most formative experiences of my early career. It was a few years after I started working in finance. I'd been grinding, putting in the hours, and I received my first really substantial bonus. We're talking a figure that, for me at that age, felt like a windfall. And what did I do? Exactly what we just talked about not doing. I fell headfirst into the lifestyle inflation trap. Almost immediately, that bonus money burned a hole in my pocket. My internal narrative was something like, I've worked hard, I deserve this. And while there's truth to rewarding yourself, I took it to an extreme without any real long-term thought. The first big purchase was a car, a sleek German sports sedan that was way more car than I needed and, frankly, could comfortably afford when you factored in everything. Then came the accessories to that lifestyle. Designer clothes I barely wore, expensive watches, eating out at trendy restaurants several nights a week simply because I could. On the surface, to an outsider, I probably looked successful. I had the trappings. But internally, a different story was unfolding. I remember this distinct feeling, maybe 6 or 8 months into this new, upgraded lifestyle. I was sitting in my expensive car, in traffic, on my way to a job that I generally liked, but I felt trapped. I realized I was working incredibly hard, not to build freedom or to increase my actual financial security, but primarily to maintain these things. The car payment was a beast, the insurance was eye-watering, and my savings rate, which had been decent before, had plummeted. My net worth, when I finally had the courage to look at it honestly, had barely budged, despite the significant increase in my income. The aha moment wasn't a sudden lightning bolt, but more of a dawning, uncomfortable realization. I was living a life that was performative, in a way. I was chasing a version of success that was defined by external validation rather than internal satisfaction or long-term security. It was a pretty stark wake-up call. I felt a bit foolish, actually. Here I was, working in finance, advising others in a junior capacity, yet my own financial house was built on a shaky foundation of consumer debt and vanity. That experience, that feeling of being on a high-earning hamster wheel, was incredibly humbling. But it was also the catalyst I needed. It forced me to get brutally honest with myself about my values, my priorities, and what true wealth actually meant to me. It wasn't about the flashy car. It was about options, freedom, and peace of mind. That failure, if you can call it that, ignited a much deeper passion for understanding personal finance, not just theoretically, but practically. I started devouring books, not just on investing, but on behavioral finance, on the psychology of money, on frugal living, on building sustainable wealth. I realized that controlling my spending and consciously, systematically focusing on growing my net worth, the actual assets minus liabilities, was infinitely more empowering than just chasing a bigger paycheck to fund a more expensive lifestyle. It led me to downsize the car, cut back drastically on the frivolous spending, and aggressively redirect that cash flow into investments. The relief was almost immediate. And seeing my net worth start to climb, slowly at first, but then with more momentum, was far more satisfying than any material possession had ever been. So yes, that couve up, that brush with lifestyle inflation was a painful but ultimately invaluable lesson that profoundly shaped my approach to finance and in many ways led me to want to share these insights more broadly.
That personal journey really underscores the importance of a solid, conscious strategy. Now, Max, looking ahead, we're always trying to give our listeners a bit of a forward-looking perspective here on WealthWise. If you had to identify one significant shift or trend in the next 3 to 5 years that you believe will meaningfully define or reshape how individuals can achieve financial success, what would that be?
That's a great question, Sarah, because the landscape is constantly evolving. If I had to put my finger on one major trend, I'd say it's the accelerated rise and increasing sophistication of AI-driven personalized finance and hyper-automation. We're already seeing the early stages of this with robo-advisors and budgeting apps, but I believe we're on the cusp of something much more profound. Think about AI moving beyond just categorizing your expenses or suggesting a generic ETF portfolio. I envision AI tools that can provide truly bespoke financial coaching and execution at a scale and cost-effectiveness previously unimaginable. For example, imagine an AI that doesn't just track your spending, but uses behavioral analytics to understand your specific spending triggers and offers personalized nudges or interventions in real time to help you stay on track with your goals. Or an AI that can analyze your complete financial picture, your income, debts, investments, tax situation, even your stated life goals like buying a home or retiring early, and then proactively suggest optimized debt repayment strategies, rebalance your portfolio with a high degree of granularity, or identify nuanced tax loss harvesting opportunities that a human advisor might miss unless they're incredibly dialed in. We could see AI helping individuals dynamically adjust their financial plans based on life events, a new job, a child, an inheritance, almost instantaneously. It could also play a huge role in financial education, delivering customized learning paths based on an individual's knowledge gaps and goals. The potential for democratizing access to high-level financial strategy is immense. Companies are already working on platforms that integrate your bank accounts, investment portfolios, credit scores, and even loyalty programs to provide a truly holistic and predictive financial co-pilot. However, this isn't without its caveats. This increasing reliance on AI will also demand a higher level of financial literacy from users to critically evaluate the AI's recommendations. We can't just blindly follow what the algorithm says. Understanding the underlying principles will be more important than ever. There are also significant data privacy and security concerns that will need to be robustly addressed. And there's the risk of algorithmic bias if the AI models aren't trained on diverse enough datasets, potentially perpetuating existing inequalities. But overall, I see AI not as a replacement for human judgment, especially for complex, emotionally charged financial decisions, but as an incredibly powerful enabler. It will give individuals tools to make smarter, more informed, and more personalized financial decisions with greater ease and efficiency, potentially accelerating their path to financial goals like reaching that top 10% net worth if that's what they're aiming for. The key will be harnessing it wisely.
That's a fascinating and, I think, very realistic forecast, Max. The idea of AI as a financial co-pilot is compelling, offering both immense opportunity and, as you rightly pointed out, a need for continued critical thinking and literacy. It's definitely something for all of us to watch and engage with thoughtfully.
Max, this has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. From demystifying that top 10% net worth figure, making it feel more tangible at around $1.06 million, to outlining those critical mistakes to avoid, like lifestyle inflation and investment paralysis, and then giving us that clear, actionable roadmap focusing on budgeting, debt elimination, and consistent investing. Your personal story was so impactful, and that look into the future of AI and finance is truly thought-provoking. Thank you so much, Max Wise, for generously sharing your expertise and your wisdom with the WealthWise audience today.
The pleasure was all mine, Sarah. Thanks again for having me. I hope it's been valuable for your listeners.
Immensely valuable, I have no doubt. All right, WealthWise listeners, that's a wrap on another episode packed with insights. If you found as much value in today's conversation as I did, and you're feeling inspired to take control of your financial future, here are 3 simple things you can do right now. 1. Share this episode. Think of one friend, family member, or colleague who's on their own financial journey and could benefit from hearing Max's insights. Send it their way. A quick text, an email, share it on your socials. Let's spread this knowledge. 2. Subscribe to WealthWise wherever you get your podcasts. We drop new episodes weekly filled with practical strategies and deep dives designed to help you achieve your financial breakthroughs. Hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss out. 3. Let us know your thoughts. What was your biggest takeaway from today's episode? Do you have a personal financial turning point you'd be willing to share? Drop a comment on our social media channels or leave a review on your podcast app. We love hearing from you, and it helps others find the show. Building wealth, achieving financial freedom, it's not some secret handshake or a stroke of luck. As Max has so clearly articulated, it's about understanding the fundamentals, avoiding common pitfalls, and consistently applying proven strategies. So, as you go about your week, remember this. Financial freedom isn't just a dream you hope for. It's a destination you navigate to with a clear map and consistent action. Thank you so much for tuning into WealthWise. Until next time, take care and build wisely.